you, again, like I said, something like an employment, or not employment contract, sorry, something like a drug and alcohol policy would tell you things like what's okay and what's not okay in the parameters of alcohol in the workplace, for example. So if I asked you, is it okay for employees to drink beer at a company event? Sure. There's no inherent problem with that. What if they drive home after 6? Do you have a problem with that? What if they keep it going and come in the next day still drunk? Are you okay with that? These are the things that we put in something like a drug and alcohol policy. It's not to take away the fun. We're not going to tell you you can't have beer at your company barbecue. In fact, I encourage that. That sounds great. What I don't encourage, though, is just having no rule about it, and then when people come in the next day, hungover or whatever, they're like, well, you supplied the beer. Thought this was okay. It's the ditch versus the road, right? I'm on the road when I'm having a couple of beers at the company barbecue. I'm in the ditch when I come in hungover and puking and I can't work. Or I miss work because I drank too much. Employees need to know that. Where's your boundaries? What are your rules? And if you don't tell them, we can't really be mad when they don't follow. There is no such thing as common sense, I'm afraid. Okay? You have to tell them what they need to know. So that's your frameworks. Very basic, very simple stuff that we ask everybody to have in place, or we hope everybody has in place when they start hiring. I don't have my watch on today, I feel a little lost. How am I doing? Okay, great. Okay, tough conversations and performance management. So those of you with employees, and even those of you who manage people, your tough conversations are they're your crutch. They're one of the most important things you can do as a manager. What often happens, as I kind of already said, is that employees will often not understand how upset you are about something that's going on with them until they get fired. Or they'll kind of know, but they don't fully know. So your performance management is your stepping stones leading you to either repairing something and making an employee better, or justifiably terminating someone. We're totally here to help you fire someone. What's hard to do is when you fire someone without the justification and they don't understand. They haven't known all along. Okay, that's hard to do. And it's hard for you to do that too, because that's upsetting for people. So, all we're asking with performance management is for you to get an investigation to the whole story, figure out what's going on with the person, figure out what the problem is by talking to them. That's all it is. Often I get questions like, well, I didn't give them a written warning. Like, that matters at some point, but for the most part, it's just conversations. And then email yourself. Like, I talked to Jack on Monday at 4 about his attendance. That helps us when you want to terminate someone, right? We just need the paper trail. So you can get into written warnings and suspension and stuff at some point, but the first part is just figuring out how we're going to solve the problem. Why did the person make the mistake? Were they trained properly? Did they understand? Did they not understand? That's a simple question. And basically what we would say is you get into this thing called discovery. So I don't know if you have had this experience before, but often what happens is we make up in our mind what went wrong. Someone did something wrong and we're just mad. Okay? What I want with performance management and what works in a perfect world is that instead of being mad, you go and problem solve. You discover what happened. Why did it happen? What was going wrong that day? Figure out the details of the situation. And then you can determine if you need to discipline or not. Often we jump straight from mistake and issue to discipline. Just asking for one more step in between. So you're just discover first. Discover what happened, what the problem is, and then you're moving to discipline. So, oftentimes, we think The person is the problem, right? Have you guys heard of this thing called the fundamental attribution error? Does anyone know what that is? Probably not. Yeah. Okay. The fundamental attribution error is actually a psychology term that says that most of the time we will assume that the person is the problem and not the situation. Here's an example. What do you think when someone cuts you off in traffic? Say it. What do you think?
Crappy driver.
Crappy driver. What else? What do you think? What do you say in your mind? Or out loud? What was that? What is it?
Can't say it out loud.
You can't say it out loud. Exactly. That's kind of where I was going with that. Yeah, exactly. So what happens with the fundamental attribution error is it's kind of embedded in all of us. It's like a human trait where we assume person is bad when something goes sideways. Instead of possibly and maybe situation is bad. So like if someone cuts you off in traffic, how many of you as the first thought is like, oh, maybe they're rushing to the hospital? Does anyone have that first thought? Great. That's great. We need to be more like you. Most people have some bad thought, like jerk, or what's going on here, right? But if you, this happens with employees too. When they do something wrong, they're late to work, they've wrecked something, they backed your truck into something, and you think, idiot, or something along those lines. The fundamental attribution error says that our human knee-jerk reaction is to blame the person when there's more to the situation. So what performance management is getting out of the person blame and into what happened. What might be going on that caused the problem. And if you can be the kind of boss that can lean on that, what happened? Let me learn the situation. You'll probably have better retention and all the things that everybody wants, right? A better employer resume. So we often defer to the person's the problem because then we don't have to really do much else about it, like just, they're the problem. We hired someone wrong, right? So we move to discipline once we figure out what's going on, once you ask all the questions, what happened here. If something happened that needs to be disciplined, you move to discipline. Simple. And we use something called 4 pieces of paper. You don't need to remember this, but basically the 4 pieces of paper are the steps in the labor law. A verbal warning, a written warning, a suspension, and a termination. So that when you call someone like me and say, I want to terminate this person that's worked here for 3 years, and I tell you 6 weeks pay, and you get mad at me, I can ask, did you do the 4 pieces of paper? So that's how we're just asking you to progress people along the disciplinary track until they're ready to no longer work for you. Okay? It's quite simple. And it's not, the stuff with HR often I think is made to be complex, and some situations, certainly with employees, do get complex. And they're layered, and there's legal elements to it, and there's all kinds of performance problems, and they give you excuses, and it's hard. Sometimes it is hard to find what's actually going on. But often things can boil down to, have you asked them what's going on, and have you figured out how to performance manage them through the problem? So you do the warning, of course, the consequences, and then the termination. So I'm kind of buzzing through this section because it's not the most important thing we'll talk about today. It's just to highlight that HR foundations are very important, and then kind of secondary is being able to manage people who are your problem. Okay. And anyone who's had to performance manage someone knows how kind of hard and complex and